This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by Case IH. Coming up on this weekend's broadcast, our agriculture forecaster looks at the winter ahead of us here. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this weekend's broadcast. It's a privilege for Armstrong here to be alongside Mr. Pearson. How are you?
It's a privilege for me as well, Max. I'm well.
Well, are you getting ready for travel in the winter time?
I am. Travel in the cold. It's here.
We'll talk about it a little bit later here, what is just ahead. But let's talk with Greg Solier right now about that overall winter forecast. Just how rough does it appear the way you see it?
Another character-building one. We know it gets cold. We know it snows, but stratospheric warming, weakening La Nina may not be for the faint of heart here. First, from a mid-December to mid-January standpoint, look at this lobe of cold air already experiencing a fair amount of this here, stretched out with the main trough, if you will, across the heartland, some degree of warmth, if you will, over the deep south and southeastern part of the country. But you come up with this. Note that we had that compaction of temperatures, so it will be especially stormy. Great Lakes region, eastern Corn Belt, up through Big Sky country. For some, good news. For others, not so good, especially down through Texas and the Southwest. La Nina's mean, not much significant winter moisture there.
Those guys who like winter sports, getting out with the snowmobiles across the northern part of the country should be able to do so.
Yeah, the plow guys will be going crazy, hopefully making some big bucks, but it will be bone chilling out there. This lobe of cold and well below zero type cold here through the Canadian Prairie. Note how the jet stream swings down through Oklahoma, right up the Ohio Valley, the warmth suppressed down south. You know what's coming up here. This scenario, you want some moisture now later this springtime, and with the springtime rains to improve the river level here. This may be too much of a good thing. Again, winter storm it is for this part of the country, back through Big Sky country as well. Limited drought relief over the southwestern states continuing on.
So we'll be moving a lot of snow, it appears.
It appears that way, heading down through basically the last third of the wintertime season, mid-February into mid-March here. The cold relaxing some through the Canadian Prairie, warmth down south. It will be a stormy scenario for much of the northern plains. Corn Belt locales probably extends into the springtime too.
Make sure you have your snow shovel in your trunk.
That's right, because it is going to be cold. It sounds like weather-wise. It's also getting cold on the trade front with Mexico. We saw the Mexican president look to shut down GMO imports, and the national corn growers are keeping an eye on this issue. Mike Adams talked with their president.
We're getting our voice out there, and we're making sure that the administration knows how serious this is for farming practices for the American corn farmer, but also how it could really affect the Mexico people if this was to go through of using non-GMO, how much more it's going to cost them to the families to live and to eat, because there's not a lot of GMO products in the pipeline right now.
So I think that's key. Ramifications to be felt on both sides of the border if this goes through.
Exactly right. You know, so I mean, you know, if say for instance myself, we grow 1,000 acres of corn. If we were to go say 200 acres or 300 acres of non-GMO, you got to make sure it's separated. You got to make sure that your combine's cleaned out so you don't have any contamination. Then you got to make sure you have a separate bin to put it all in. Then the biggest thing is it going to cost, how much more is it going to cost per acre to use this? Plus, then where do we get rid of it at? Is it going to be a close elevator, a fire elevator to get rid of it? Then also, what's the cost going to be? How much more are they going to pay us for using non-GMO? So there's a lot of issues there, and you know, we all know in the fall is when farmers get the best deal of buying seed corn for next year, and I would say most of the farmers right now are buying their same practices they used before, if it's non-GMO or if it's GMO, but that's going to be in the pipeline in the year 2024.
What are you hearing from Washington as far as prospects of getting this taken care of?
Well, you know, we hear they're looking at it, but we know that we're putting an awful lot of pressure on Ambassador Tai to make sure that she tells her counterparts, you know, the president and all that, how this would affect the American farmer. So, and she also needs to reply that same information to Mexico. And the other thing is what we're making sure they do is they're reading the rules of that trade pact that we have between Mexico and Canada and us. Are they following the rules that are in there, or are they going to be, oh no, we're not doing it just because we don't want to do it? So that is what we've got to make our administration, and it's going to be a serious thing coming down the road if they decide to go, because I don't know if there's enough corn from Brazil or Argentina to fulfill their needs of non-GMO. So it's an issue, and corn growers are going to stay right up on top of this. We're not going to let this one slide through the cracks and forget about.
Well, thank you, Mike, and thanks to Tom Haig, new president of the National Corn Growers Association. This discussion with Mexico will be ongoing all year as their ban is set to take place January 1st of 2024. This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone Ag. The Firestone Ag Dealer Network offers you the support, inventory, and resources you need. Visit firestoneag.com to find your local certified dealer. And it's time to check in on the markets. Joining us this week is Brian Basting, economist at ATI. And Brian, this time of year, the attention turns to South America. What are we seeing down there on their soybean production front this fall?
It's a mixed bag at the moment, Mike. A very fine start, as it were, in Brazil. The crop has been planted primarily in most areas, and they are getting some timely rainfall. So the potential is there, underline the word potential, for a record crop in Brazil, in contrast to last year when they had some shortfall in the south. In contrast, however, Argentina is dry. It's been dry for quite some time. That has slowed the planting progress. Historically, Argentina plants aggressively in November. That didn't happen this year. They are behind at least 20 percentage points on planting in Argentina. So December will be a big month to get the crop in the ground. Then January, Mike, pod set and pod fill. So quite a divergence between those two countries.
So we do have that crop growing in the field, but we also have Argentina making some moves to export more soybeans. Brian, what did they do this past week?
The Soy Dollar program, Mike, is designed to give the producer more pesos, as it were. It's encouraging them to sell aggressively. The first instance of this occurred back in September, Mike, and they aggressively sold, and Argentina government in turn aggressively exported those beans. We look for the same thing to happen this time.
All right, so that will be kicking off. Brian, is that going to impact American soybean exports as you look out over this winter?
More competition, Mike, no doubt.
All right, how much is it going to impact American exports?
We saw that impact back in this fall, as I mentioned, back in September. It sliced into the U.S. export share of the pie, as it were, for the world export market. I think it's a competitive market out there for exports right now. We'll see what the USDA does in its December 9th supply-demand report, but it certainly feels like that the beans are struggling right now maybe to reach that USDA forecast.
You know, looking ahead to that USDA report next Friday, Brian, do you expect any changes to the corn export numbers?
Corn exports, Mike, are very anemic at this point. Corn export sales are anemic. Tremendous competition from Brazil at the moment. Brazil has established an agreement to ship a lot of corn to China now. So we've lost that Chinese market. Japan has been slower to buy U.S. corn this year, buying more of their needs from Brazil. So we would not be surprised in that December 9th report, Mike, to see a reduction in the exports from the U.S.
All right, lots to watch as that report gets closer. We'll be back for more with Brian Basting, economist at ATI. This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone Ag. Harvey Firestone invented the first pneumatic farm tire, forever changing what it means to farm hard. Visit firestoneag.com to learn more about this history and tire solutions for today. We're talking markets with Brian Basting, economist at ATI. And Brian, you outlined some of the potential risks that are out there developing in South America, notably for producers looking at the markets as they sit right now. How do you best prepare yourself for 2023?
It's a great question, Mike. What we encourage your viewers to think about is defending their balance sheet. By that we mean we know that the markets are going to be volatile. We just don't know which direction. So what we want to do is take the prices that are available today, very attractive, particularly in relation to production here domestically in the U.S., and let's get control of those old crop bushels. By old crop, I mean the 22 bushels. Let's get control. By that we mean let's get a floor underneath this market. A lot of ways we can do that. We can sell the bushels. We can turn around and buy a call option to give our upside opportunity. We can turn around and buy a put option alternatively. All the things that are available to us are marketing tools, risk management tools, Mike. But let's get control of these 22 bushels. Then let's look ahead to 23, Mike. Remind your viewers that the 23 crop insurance base price will not be set until February. So we got about 90 days here of risk, as it were, to the downside. We know December futures for 23 are over $6 a bushel. November 23 beans, Mike, are approaching $14 a bushel. So defend your balance sheet, use those marketing tools that are available. Avoid painting yourself into a corner. Give yourself flexibility if something happens with South American weather and or demand that the market can run to the upside. but let's get a floor underneath these prices.
Let's talk about that defense for the balance sheet. Brian, if I'm getting control of these bushels, how far out into the future do I want to maintain control? Am I looking to own these all through next summer?
Another fine question, Mike. I think with regards to soybeans, let's at least get through the growing period here. For example, on a call option side, maybe let's look at that March call option. And by that we mean by about the 1st of February, we're going to have a pretty good idea what Brazil looks like and pretty good idea on Argentina. For corn, however, Mike, I might extend that a bit out to May because the Safrinha corn in Brazil will not be planted until February. So we want to give ourselves time in case some weather issues develop there in February, March, or April. But I would at least start there, and if we start to see some things develop demand-wise, maybe extend that coverage. But for the short term, I'd go March calls on beans and May calls on corn.
Brian, is there any advantage to looking ahead to pricing 2024 production quite yet?
It's not out of the realm of looking at this point, Mike. I think it's a great question. I would say this, though, to your viewers. Get your ducks in a row. Get that 22 locked in. Get it protected. Get control of it. Turn your attention to 23. But you're right. It isn't too early to look at 24.
There's so much happening in these markets. That volatility, yes. Brian, you expect to continue on into 2023?
Embrace volatility, Mike, as a producer. Avoid being scared of it. It's going to be with us, but embrace it as we have the last couple of years.
All right. Brian Basting, economist, ATI, thanks for joining us today.
Chad Colby's look at agriculture technology comes your way next, brought to you by the IBM Watson Decision Platform, combining AI with Internet of Things data to help agribusiness increase yields, improve quality, and drive sustainability. Those of us who rely heavily on our devices sometimes have the feeling it has far more capability than we take advantage of. I need to take a class. Here's Chad Colby with a short course this weekend.
There's so much horsepower in these smart devices, most of us are using just a fraction of it. I wanted to give you a couple interesting things on iPhones. Here in the web browser, you can see I've got 4 tabs open. Did you know if you hold that button down in the right corner, you can actually close all the tabs at once? But something really cool that we all use, maybe not to its fullest extent, is what you can do with screen recording. So you can see here, I'm going to take a snapshot of this Prairie Farmer article, open it up, and I'm going to make it full screen. That creates a PDF of the article, which is really handy if you want to email that off. Maybe you want to circle some information. Well, you can see I don't draw that well, and probably most of us don't with our finger, but get this. Did you catch that? If you draw it and then hold it with your finger, it will recognize the shape. So it'll make a nice circle or a nice arrow. Then when you're done, you can go up there to that upper right corner. You can forward that off in a text or an email. It works so slick. Speaking of something else you might not know about your phone, did you know that we're all familiar with swiping with one finger? You swipe up or down, you can scroll through. But did you know if you use 2 fingers, it'll actually select what you're looking at? So maybe you're trying to delete some emails like I'm doing here, or some messages or voicemails. It's super easy to do that. And one last thing that's so important, if you go into your settings, scroll down to Emergency SOS, and click on that button that says Call with 5 button presses, and essentially push that side button 5 times, and you're in business. It'll call for help. But last but not least, most importantly, if you got more questions, you're curious about security or anything else with your smartphone, go out to YouTube. There's so many great videos out there to help you maximize that technology in your smart device.
Growers are always looking for new tools in the tool shed, I guess you could say, in terms of weed control on the farm. And wheat producers have particular needs. We want to visit about that with Ryan Bryant Schlobaum, who visited with us here from UPL to talk about a new product that they have for weed control. Ryan, it's nice to have you with us here.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity. UPL's got a new solution that we recently received EPA registration for, known as Battalium Amped herbicide.
Battalium Amp, correct?
Yes, sir. Battalium Amped. It's a new post-emergence herbicide from UPL, and it's a premix of 3 modes of action. So provides highly effective weed control and a high-performance formulation over a list of broadleaf and grass weeds that spring and winter wheat growers traditionally battle.
3 modes of weed control. Why is that important to us?
Well, in today's landscape of weed management, really an integrated approach is going to be most effective. we battle a lot of herbicide resistance out there today in a lot of our native weed populations, especially when we think of weeds like kochia. And bringing as many effective modes of action together as we can is where we're going to see optimized success. So with Battalium Amped herbicide, we have 3 highly effective modes of action. So those include the Group 2 herbicide flucarbazone, and we combine that with fluroxapyr, which is a Group 4, and the bromoxynil, which is a Group 6. These are 3 highly effective modes of action and gives us really great control over grass weeds such as wild oats, green foxtail, as well as herbicide-resistant kochia, like I mentioned, in addition to such things as Russian thistle and common lamb's quarter, and a long list of other broadleaf weeds.
That herbicide resistance has gradually worked its way north. I guess it occurs to me, in our wheat acreage in the United States, we cover so much of an expanse of the lower 48 states. Is there a particular region where your product from UPL would be most effective or most embraced by growers, perhaps?
Of course. So that's always something to really keep in mind is, where does a product fit best? And with Battalium Amped, we've got a really nice broad acre approach. This is a product that can be used in spring or winter wheat, but I think it's going to find an exceptional home in our northern Great Plains spring wheat acres. So we had plots in Minot, North Dakota this past summer, and we saw Battalium Amped provide excellent control of green foxtail and kochia. What really makes it unique and has a really nice fit in those acres is it's got a unique finishing power. So we see very fast acting activity, but then also long lasting residual control from the flucarbazone component on waves of grassy weeds, specifically green foxtail.
So the federal approval has been given. Is some state approval necessary as well for Battalium Amped, or does the EPA decision clear the way for the growers to use the product?
Correct, yeah. So like you mentioned, we've received EPA registration. State registrations are in the process of being submitted and approved. So definitely check with your local area to be sure that it is, but we'll have plans to have this fully available for this upcoming 2023 growing season.
Very good. I was going to ask you that. Where can someone find out more about Battalium Amped?
Of course. So your local retailers and UPL representatives are a great resource. Also be sure to visit www.battaliumamped.com to find out more information.
Brian Bryant Schlobaum from UPL visiting with us about Battalium Amped. Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. In the weeks ahead, there will be much talk about a farm bill. In fact, we'll have a discussion a little bit later on here on This Week in Agribusiness. But there is much more to be concerned about in Washington other than that long-term farm bill.
There certainly is, Max. We think a lot about the legislation, but there's also the regulation and the regulatory and administrative bodies that are working in D.C. And recently, we saw Fish and Wildlife Service announce that the lesser prairie chicken has been put on the endangered species list. For our listeners out in the Great Plains, this is a big issue. Been talking about it for some time.
Hasn't been there in the past? Wasn't it there before?
Oh, that is a good question, Max. It might have been. They pulled it off and now they've re-added it, but I know this discussion to get the prairie chicken re-added has been ongoing for some time, and now it's final. This is a final rule. Texas and New Mexico, it's endangered. Other places in its territory, it's threatened, Max. So this is a big change.
It can inhibit what the landowners do with their land. That's the big concern, right?
It certainly is. Cattle producers and sheep producers, a lot of livestock groups are concerned with this issue, and we'll see how it plays out. But they're not the only groups concerned with the new focus on the Endangered Species Act. Crop protection chemical manufacturers also have to keep track of what's going on in that space, and Mike Adams recently had the chance to talk with Chris Novak, President and CEO of CropLife America.
Farmers have been battling pests for centuries, and to some extent even the first agriculturalists in the world were utilizing different methods to control pests. Some of those were chemical methods. So pesticides actually can go back about 6,500 years within agriculture. Today, however, we're a science and technology driven industry. And so our companies will screen tens of thousands of different molecules to identify a new chemistry that might help farmers fight an emerging weed or insect, can help farmers manage resistance, which sometimes can develop as we're trying to fight different pests that can hurt our crops. We will spend 8 to 10 years researching a molecule, taking it from concept to the field. But once we're done with that process, we then submit an application to EPA. And today, getting through EPA is taking almost another 4 years. It's supposed to take 2 under the law, but the fact that it's taking 4 means that we're not bringing farmers the new tools and technologies that we know that they need.
How do you deal with the societal issues? You know, consumer concerns about chemicals being used, or how it impacts our water supply and things like that. What's the message we need to get out about that?
Well, certainly we know that concern from consumers about pesticides is central to our business. And that is why we put 8 to 10 years of research into developing those pesticides. But that's also why we need an effective and strong federal regulatory system in place, because we know that consumers will trust the EPA. But unfortunately, many consumers don't understand the depth and breadth of the regulatory process. They don't understand the due diligence that we go through. Consumers do think about pesticides, and they see farmers driving through a field with a sprayer, or they may see a crop duster applying a fungicide to a field, and they don't think about it in the context of their daily life. But if you open up your kitchen sink and if you see a product that is labeled as, kills germs and bacteria, that is a pesticide. It is regulated by the same EPA division that approves our agricultural chemicals. And so, whether you're using it in your home or a farmer is using it on their field, both of those products have been reviewed by the agency to ensure that they're handled properly and used safely.
Is the approval process, you already mentioned it's taking longer now than it ever has, do you see that getting harder in the future?
It is getting harder. EPA's job is to look at each and every one of those individual chemistries and determine their impact on those threatened and endangered species. Think about that from a math standpoint. Think about the territory that is covered, as we talk about crop production here in the United States, and the calculation that EPA has to do, the consultation that EPA is supposed to do with the Fish and Wildlife Service is a highly complex process. And so again, the agencies need the resources to be able to do the job, to look at each of these chemistries and to ensure that we're not impacting threatened or endangered species.
And all this at a time when we've just been reminded this last year the challenges of food production and feeding the world.
Exactly. And so, we need new tools. We need new tools faster. We have added, to your question of the complexity of the regulatory process, we've added some new requirements at EPA in the last year to further protect threatened and endangered species. And then, yes, farmers need the ability to produce more food when we've seen 10% of the world's corn crop coming out of Ukraine, and that's threatened and vulnerable. Or 5% of the corn crop, I think 10% of the wheat crop. That is creating global malnutrition in a way that we haven't seen before. And that's exactly where having pesticide tools, having biotechnology, having seeds that have been designed to withstand drought or cold, that can protect themselves from pests, all of those tools and technologies in agriculture are absolutely important to being able to provide food security here in the U.S. as well as around the globe.
Educating consumers about that connection between the two.
Exactly.
Well, thanks to Mike Adams for that conversation with Chris Novak, President and CEO of Crop Life America. Stick around. When we return, we'll get into the weather with Greg Solier.
This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by Case IH.
Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. Max, you had the opportunity to reflect recently on this past growing season.
Yeah, we were on the farm in Missouri, Shelbina, Missouri, the northeast part of the state, looking back on what happened with Brian Threlkeld, who farms there, who makes the point pretty profoundly that those fungicide products can really make a difference in yield. Here's our latest update in our Plant Smart, Grow Smart series from BASF. Back on this growing season, were there any unique challenges, or was it pretty much a typical growing season here in this part of Missouri?
Well, I don't know that there's ever a typical growing season in Missouri, but yeah, we was a month late getting started, so we was kind of under the gun to get going, and then we got the crop in, it got up good, got going, had perfect stands, and then we went through this dry period there for a while. We went 5-6 weeks without a rain, and we was just wondering whether them beans and stuff was going to hold on. It seemed like the corn, they fared through it really good, and the beans, I wasn't sure, but it ended up, the beans did all right.
Let's talk about soybeans specifically and the approach in your fields this year. First of all, are there disease and environmental problems that you have to tackle in your beans?
There is some diseases. I mean, you'd have some frog eye, you'd have some white mold. So when we're out there scouting now, it's more of a timing, not necessarily scouting as much for the diseases, because we know we're going to have them. We know we're going to have them, so we're going to treat every acre. You use fungicide on every acre we farm now.
You do, total?
Totally.
And you have obviously seen results in soybeans. I mean, you know that it's making a difference.
It does make a difference, yeah, in the soybeans. The plant will be healthier, the beans will be bigger, and most of the time the yield is bigger. Now, year in, year out, I'd say we're seeing 5 to 7 bushel, and some good years they've been 10 to 12 bushel. So, I'm a full believer in fungicide on soybeans. We use a lot of Preaxor, have used a lot of Preaxor in the past for years, and this year we did use some Veltima on probably a third of the acres, but most of it was Preaxor and or Veltima. So the Veltima, you can spray a little earlier, get out there just a little bit earlier when you got all these acres getting ready to pile up on you, like this year when we planted all that in 12 days. So, the timing window is pretty tight. So that's one thing about that product. You can spray it a little bit earlier and get out there and get going.
I'm sure there are some farmers who say, oh boy, maybe I should cut back here on this investment. How do you look at the investment of fungicides in your soybeans?
Well, I don't look at it that way. I look at, when you got high dollar soybeans, you want to grow every one that you can grow. So you got to protect the crop that you planted, and it doesn't matter whether it's fertilizer or the seed or the chemical or treatments. I mean, we're here. I only got so many growing seasons. I'm here to grow every bushel I can grow every year. So I wouldn't do it if I didn't think I was getting a good return. So I'm going to continue to do it.
That was a very enjoyable visit we had with Brian there as he was wrapping up harvest, Shelbina, Missouri. You can see more of our Plan Smart, Grow Smart series at plansmartgrowsmart.com. Greg Solier now brings us his farm weather forecast for the week ahead, presented by Pivot Bio Proven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot Bio Proven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com. All of the Christmas carols remind us it's beginning to look a lot like Christmas, I guess weather-wise too.
It is. It's also looking like Christmas on your tie there, Max.
Well, you noticed.
I
I'm
did.
glad you did. Hey, the clock is ticking. It'll be here before you know it.
That's right.
Are we going to see some significant snows here this week?
I don't think so, at least as they apply to the heartland now across areas of the northern and central Rockies of late, into the Sierra Range as well of late. You bet. Long way to go before the drought is over with. And again, La Nina years, it's not real optimistic here. The moisture pattern across California and the Southwest. But we do have a string of weather systems on the move, and this is one heck of a jet stream current. You get a range of temperatures up aloft. You get them at the surface as well. Sub-zero here, 80 at the Gulf Coast. So it'll be a strong current, but fast-moving disturbances. The heart of the cold right now through Montana, Big Sky Country, and the Canadian Prairie. And yeah, there's some snow cover on the ground. We'll add a little bit to it. No major systems with this kind of fast-moving jet stream, but it is digging. Indicator of more cold air on the move out of the Canadian Prairie, northern Plains States areas. It'll dash of moisture to the Pacific Northwest and Northern California. Last week, nice to see some moisture into that particular part of the country. And this week, here, looky here, we've got a system making its way out of the central sections of California and the Sierra. It will make a run here across the southern sections of the Rockies. Good news, there'll be some rain into parts of California. Healthy snows for the Sierra ranges and the Intermountain West as well, and into the southwestern sections of the country. A little bit of moisture, scattered showers and thunderstorms across sections sections of the southern plains. That moisture pattern will be on the wane with some cold air dumping back to dry time across the valleys of California later in the week. So you take anything you can get in a La Nina setup this time of the year with moisture in California.
In November, we saw such temperature gyrations. Is that behind us now?
Nope, at least as it applies to areas into the Great Plains, the central part of the country on southward. I think by and large, once we get locked into this polar vortex, you know, we get into that. That's a normal nomenclature for the wintertime season, the upper air low here, but it will be a strong one this year. But in the meantime, fairly quiet, the weather pattern, a little snow and rain system out of the plains into the central and southern Corn Belt, the cold air locked into the Sioux, back bills across parts of Big Sky country, but it's manageable out there. It's some degree of moisture here for the middle and late parts of the week, heading through the Ohio Valley into the Great Lakes region with colder but not too bitter weather and some winter sunshine as well back into the northern and central plain states areas. A little mixture of rain and snow. We'll take anything we can get in these worst drought areas of Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, pasture lands, forget about it. A little rain down through the Gulf Coast area with a system coming out of New Mexico responsible for some healthy moisture in the southwestern sections of the country. That system moves to the east, some shower activity for the Gulf Coast area, cooler to colder weather back into through areas of Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas with some sunshine back into the desert southwest as well.
And East Coast states fairly quiet, or how do you see that?
Yeah, pretty quiet. No major systems on the maps and charts. We've had a couple of healthy ones blow through. Boy, one day you get a 40-mile-an-hour south wind. Other days it's a west-northwest wind from the Missouri on eastward. But this will be a weak feature coming out of the Ozarks into the central and southern Corn Belt. Little light rain snow mixture. That system will move into areas of the northeast of New England. Manageable on the winter sense here. Some snow up towards the Sioux, back into some winter sunshine into the western Corn Belt locales later in the week. A chilly rain expected once again. What else is new? Gulf Coast area, northern Florida, high pressure across the Tennessee Valley. Another weak system across Oklahoma and Texas. That is on the move as well, with some additional scattered showers and thunderstorms and sub-average temperatures the mid to late portions of the week over the deep southeastern portions of the country.
Greg Solier is back with his extended farm weather forecast for the country, presented by Pivot Bio-Proven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot Bio-Proven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com.
Well, December's here, Max, but severe weather's not over yet, is it?
You know, we have to worry about that. Remember, it was December 10th last year. Wasn't it, Greg?
Yes.
December 10th when Mayfield, Kentucky was slammed.
Exactly. And, you know, we had some of that stuff just past week, anywhere from 2 to 3 dozen reports, whether it was tornadic activity, hail, high wind, something you think in springtime? Nope. Any time of the year under the right circumstances. That was the story last week in this particular area, the Ozarks, down into the northern end of Florida, the Panhandle reaches. And, you know, we might see that in this particular corridor again later this week. Some generous rains, back edge of the northern and western flank in the cold air, some accumulating snow, manageable into the northeast of New England, Great Lakes region, back across sections of the northern and central Rockies, upslope here. But the main story, gentlemen, this week, great news in the Pacific Northwest, valleys of California, across the Sierra, some generous rain and snow anticipated. Not the way La Nina goes, but we'll take anything that we can get this time of the year.
Greg, what do you expect to see temperature-wise the week of December 12th?
That cold air locked into position. Yeah, it's been kind of early and often the feel of January in some levels with some sub-zero cold in the upper Midwest. The cold air easing a little bit. You know, we talk about the polar vortex. It's there year-round, but really dominant during the winter season. Should stay here. We think with time it's going to move back, but it's still locked in early enough up towards the Sioux. So some cold weather down to the Ohio, normal temperatures over the southeast, a little bit of above average and through the valleys of California, Texas, and Oklahoma, where there's some good news, not the way the entire La Nina pattern goes. We'll take it in the southwestern sections, Oklahoma, Texas, wet weather into the eastern states, and perhaps a little bit of snowfall for the Ohio Valley. Dry time for now, upper Midwest and Pacific Northwest.
Greg, the week that leads us to Christmas, what are you seeing? Who's going to have a white Christmas?
Well, from a temperature standpoint, got to get it cold enough, and should be, although the cold is kind of relaxing a little bit here. The low for now moving back into the Canadian Prairie, back to more seasonal levels here into the Pacific Northwest. A little bit of warmth into the southwestern part of the country, and a nice recovery off the chilly rain over the deep south and southeastern part of the country. The winter solstice at the 21st at 3:48 in the afternoon in the central time zone, and we come up with this analysis of perhaps an active weather pattern greeting the season across much of the Midwest, the Corn Belt into the eastern states. Probably snow and rain, an icy mixture. Normal precip over the southeastern section of the country. Dry for Southern California. A little bit of moisture into the Pacific Northwest. The storm pattern is ramping on up.
Well, Greg, I can't believe I'm going to ask you this, but what do you see the last week of 2022?
And we get ready to ring in 2023. Here is the re-emergence of that cold that just sort of warbles around up here, back and forth, and the next little dose and spell comes through the upper Midwest. Look at the cold all the way down to the Ohio River. Some warmth over the deep south, and again, this compaction of temperatures at the surface and up aloft. You strengthen the jet stream winds and no shortage of features again into the Pacific Northwest, bypassing much of California and the Southwest. Storms will energize here over the plains. There's some drought relief, maybe the wrong kind of moisture. Heads up though, livestock operations. Look at the swath of storminess. So across the Corn Belt will probably rain, maybe some ice at the I-70 corridor, and healthy snows from the Board of Trade on northward.
Next on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, spotlighting another great American tractor.
It's heat Hauser season on those open platform tractors. I posted that the other day. It's opened up a lot of memories for folks, including yours truly. Max's Tractor Shed is brought to you by Store Lock Tool Cabinets. You know, the end of the year is a good time to get everything in order in your shop. There's not a better way to do it than with a quality Store Lock cabinet. Go to their website, storelock.com. You'll be surprised at everything they have to offer there. Well, many of us can look back on those days when we were younger and the heat Hauser was there in a prominent role. I wasn't a kid in this shot, but yeah, that's a younger Max Armstrong. The heat Hauser was on Dad's 560. He was ready for the winter. He had the heat Hauser on and the blade on. I don't know if that was Mountie or Laddie, the collie dog on the Southwest Indiana farm. But now here's another heat Hauser in a dealership in Iowa. This was in 1954. The Ames Tribune had this photograph of the IH dealer in Ames. You can see a heat Hauser on that Super H over to the left, and behind the counter was the IH dealer, Max Armstrong. True story. Now, here's another post of a heat Hauser. Actually, I think they call it a windbreaker. Aaron in Illinois has his on already, said he's ready to move some snow. Share with me your heat Hauser windbreaker cabet photos if you care to. Let's see what's moving across the block this week at Big Iron. Here's Mark Stock.
Mac's big week of auctions on BigIron.com, December the 7th, 3,678 items. Darren Van Allen and Robert Van Allen Trust, their retirement sale in Sharon Springs, Kansas, features 142 items. There's a 2013 John Deere 8360R. Ernie Christensen Farm, they are retiring from Montrose, South Dakota. They have a 2013 Landau 6230 36-foot disc. Ken Herding is retiring from Roshholt, South Dakota. They've got a 2013 Versatile 400P four-wheel drive tractor. A big sale December 7th for Krutzinger Family Foundation out of Parks, Nebraska. They've got 122 items, including John Deere 6125R tractors. Prairie Land Partners from Emporia, Kansas will be selling a John Deere 8600i self-propelled forage harvester. Jack and Vicki Wallen are retiring from U10, Nebraska. 48 items, including a Case IH 7230 combine, a John Deere 4730 self-propelled sprayer, a Case IH Magnum 315 tractor, a Kenworth T800 day cab truck, and a special classic car auction on December the 8th, Max, featuring items from Charles Richard Oldham as they retire. 122 rare find cars selling on our classic car sale. With over 20,000 items selling the month of December, go to BigIron.com.
Well, now it's time to check in on FFA members here across the country. We like to do that each week on This Week in Agribusiness. And this week, we're joined by Carly Albright. She's the Kansas State FFA president. Carly, your term is half over in your presidency. What are some of the inspirational things you've seen so far?
Some of the biggest inspiration that I've seen throughout the year is just the stories that FFA members across Kansas have. We've had the opportunity to really talk to some of those members, and just hearing how they got started in FFA has been really cool. Along with this, we helped out at our Kansas State Fair a couple months ago, and getting to be with the youth across Kansas that came and visited and get to explain to them how agriculture works and what all is a part of it, and just to see their eyes glow is something that I really enjoyed doing. It just made my heart happy as we continue on through the future.
That's fantastic. Carly, what was it that prompted you to join FFA in the first place?
So my sister was an FFA and my dad was long ago as well. So I knew that I kind of wanted to join FFA. It is something I've grown up on a farm, and so agriculture has always been a part of me. I joined FFA slightly hesitant of how involved I would get into it, but then I started to kind of really go and take part in the contest and all the other activities, and it just really grew in my heart. And it's something that I just really wanted to continue throughout my time in high school.
And then ended up running for leadership. Carly, what was it that made you want to try to be the president of the Kansas FFA?
I decided to run for Kansas FFA state office because of all of the ways that FFA has impacted me. I had been talking to previous state officers before, and they truly did inspire me. So to have that opportunity to be that inspiration for other young members is really the main reason that I decided to run for state office, because I can now give back to the FFA and give back to all the ways that it has given back to me.
That is fantastic. Carly, do you hope to stay in agriculture as a career?
Yes, so currently I attend Kansas State University and I'm majoring in agricultural education. So not only did FFA impact me throughout my high school years, but my ag teacher was a huge impact. She's really just helped me get on my path, and I'm excited to become an ag teacher myself after I graduate from K-State.
Well, we wish you the best of luck. Carly Albright, Kansas FFA State President.
We spend a lot of time talking about a farm bill every time that one is about to expire. They're several months ahead yet. However, some people are worried about the ability to get that job done.
It is a big question, and Mike Adams had the chance to talk with Kay Thatcher, longtime D.C. lobbyist, now with Syngenta, about her expectations once Congress comes back in January.
Well, I think we're going to come to January and it's going to be like the movie Groundhog Day, because not much really changed. You know, so far every incumbent senator that wanted to win won. Maybe Georgia changes that to one person. Something like 97% of the House Democrats and Republicans. So I don't think we're going to see a lot of change that way. I also don't think that, especially when you think about farm policy issues, specifically the Farm Bill, that it will make a lot of difference. The fact is that we learned decades ago that you got to have a bipartisan farm bill or nothing happens. And so while there'll be, I think, a different emphasis, I suspect the biggest emphasis on the House side with the Republicans in charge will be not no interest in climate change and sustainability, but certainly a lot less than what you saw when the Democrats were in charge. But to me, the big issue for the Farm Bill is really going to be, how much money do we have? Do we have any more money to improve a safety net? And you look at that $19 billion that was put there for the conservation climate change initiatives. Will the budget committee say, yep, you can add that to the baseline, you can have it? Will they say, yes, you can have it, but it all has to stay in conservation? How does that work? So I think what that means is not knowing about the budget and assuming it'll be May, June before they ever really get that worked out. I don't think there's a chance in the world we can get a farm bill done by October 1st.
When you look at the battles that take place every time we have a farm bill debate, crop insurance is usually right up there at the top. Is that going to be a big fight, do you think, to keep crop insurance or keep it close to what it is now?
Well, there will certainly be detractors that will say, oh, the premium subsidies are too high, go cut it. I think the biggest concern I have is that there are a lot of folks out there saying maybe we need more permanent disaster assistance. And, you know, we got used to that. We had the tit-for-tat trade war money, we had COVID assistance, et cetera. I don't believe in urban America that we can have a lot more permanent disaster assistance and the crop insurance program the way it is. We've spent years going to the Hill and talking about the benefits of crop insurance is that farmers really do have skin in the game, and that when you have a drought, a flood, the money goes to the farmer soon. It's not like waiting to pass a disaster bill and waiting 3 years. So I think that's going to be one of the biggest things to watch is A, is there any more money to do a permanent disaster, but B, can that be done without damaging the crop insurance program? And at this point, I would say I believe every farm group has said crop insurance is our #1 priority, the most important risk management tool we have. And so in the end, I think it'll prevail, but I don't think it's going to prevail without doing quite a bit of work.
That was Mary Kay Thatcher of Syngenta. And Max, it certainly sounds like we are not going to be short on political discussions here in this next year, and I bet we'll have some starting in January.
Yeah, there's so much that'll be on the plate, and these learning opportunities that farmers have will be in abundance in what I call the learning season. And one of those great opportunities will be the Farm Futures Summit we attend every year. That'll be at Coralville, Iowa. Later on in January, that'll be the 18th, 19th, and 20th. One special aspect of that program, I'll be hosting a discussion there with businessman, farmer, and philanthropist Howard Buffett. He'll be live there on stage with me talking about Ukraine, what is happening there in terms of their agriculture, his efforts to help the farmers. You can register for Farm Futures Summit at farmfuturesummit.com and use the promo code HOWARD to get a 20% discount. We'll both be there. Look forward to that.
I look forward to it a lot. Great marketing advice, good weather outlook. It is just truly, it covers all the bases.
It's a serious business meeting with a lot of great networking opportunities.
Yes, indeed. I've enjoyed it every time. But Max, before we get there, we've got the Christmas season. We've got New Year. We've got some special events here for This Week in Agribusiness.
We're looking forward to our special Christmas show on This Week in Agribusiness, Christmas weekend. That'll be Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. That'll be running here on This Week in Agribusiness. We'll be in some churches again to celebrate the reason for the season, as we've done every year. And then New Year's weekend, New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, looking to 2023, the 100th anniversary of the Farm Hall. We'll be visiting with executives of Case IH, some folks out who farm with International Harvester tractors, have in the past transitioned into the Case IH brand as well. It's just going to be a great show. We look forward to sharing it.
Indeed.
We hope you'll join us next weekend here on This Week in Agribusiness. We'll look for you. So long, everyone. Closed captioning for This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Kubota. Shape your world. This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Case IH. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by Omax Communications in association with 22 Creative Group. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.